So I'm very pleased to introduce you to our three speakers tonight. They're going to be talking about developing content with subject matter experts. And they are going to talk, they're going to introduce themselves actually, but I'm going to tell you who they are. It's Dimitra Chronopoulos, Dani Pacey, and Andrea Civichino. And so I'm just going to turn it over to them and let them carry on. Thank you.
Somebody forgot to actually print her notes.
Oh,
yeah.
I'm amazed.
Okay, so the three of us have actually known each other for quite some time, and we've all served some time on the exec, overlapping as well, which is how we know each other.
I'm a secretary too.
So a couple of months ago, Dani and I got together for coffee. I had seen on her LinkedIn that she had a new job, and I thought, goodness, what is an editor doing as a proposal coordinator for an engineering firm? I wanted to know more about that. So during our conversation about the kind of work that we do, at some point in the conversation, somebody said, commas? Who cares about the commas? I don't have time for the commas. We'll worry about the commas later. And that led us to really talk about, well, what is it that we do worry about in the work that we do? Whether we're working with engineers or teachers, which is who I work with a lot of the time, or historians or curators or HR specialists, also people that we've worked with in the past. So we really thought about that, and then we gave Andrea a call because we knew Andrea works a lot with accountants, and she has for quite some time, and over dinner at some of these EAC meetings, we've actually had some conversations about her work and what it is that she does. So between the three of us, we thought, you know what, there's a presentation in this. There's some ideas and some stories that we would like to share and discuss with our fellow editors. So that's how we got here, and I will let Dani start us off.
Hello. I'm just going to put a timer on so that I don't forget. Okay. Hi. All right. Plan to succeed. This is a theme. It's an imperative. It's an imperative that shapes my developmental editing work. And I may have unintentionally borrowed this title from a related, semi-related workshop series called Prepare to Win, which is offered by the Society for Marketing Professional Services, completely unrelated association, but related to what I do. I like to think that they're different, but apologies in advance if I stole that. I'm sorry. So I don't have the word editor in my job title, but editing is what I do. I work as a proposal and communications writer and coordinator at R.V. Anderson Associates Limited. It's an employee-owned, mid-sized civil infrastructure engineering firm. It's worth just over $30 million a year. And title notwithstanding, developmental editing is actually most of what I do. I shepherd subject matter experts, in my case engineers, through the process of developing proposals, competitive proposals specifically. In my work, requests for proposals, otherwise known as RFPs, you're going to hear me use that acronym a lot. They're a tool used by municipalities and other organizations to find qualified or inexpensive suppliers, depending on what they're looking for. So suppliers such as engineering consultancies submit proposals outlining their solutions to these organizations' engineering problems, whether it's we need our culverts revamped, or this road fell in, or an actual thing that has happened that we have fixed. There are some great photos of an 18-wheeler folded in half over this water main break. It's sometimes mind-blowing. So in the story I'm about to tell, has nothing to do with water mains. The client had a water treatment plant that hadn't been upgraded since the 1970s. They also had a rapidly growing population. We're talking doubling, quadrupling before 2050. They were seeking a consultant to design upgrades to allow the plant to produce double the clean water per day, and then eventually quadruple it. By the time I enter this story, RVA, my company, had already made it past the first cut. So you have to imagine this series of hurdles placed in the way of all of the consultancies, and they're all trying to race to the finish against one another. The client had selected 4 companies based on their teams and their qualifications. We had 1 month to produce a document outlining how we would solve the client's engineering problem. So there's several different hurdles that you have to think about. And we were reaching the problem one. So here's where I come in. At the time, I was barely 2 months into my job. I was very new, and I'm only 8 months in now, so you have to know there's some perspective here. I was trained as a developmental editor, though, in my previous job working in publishing at Oxford University Press Canada. I was an editorial assistant there for about 3.5 years. And in the present, I was tasked with working with one of the principals of the firm on this proposal for this water treatment plant from kickoff to delivery. A few things to say about this person, because I have a good, clear image in my mind of him, but you have no idea who he is, so I should probably describe him. One, he's a genius. He is an incredibly talented engineer and project manager. He knows all the ropes, he knows the clients inside and out. He's able to think strategically and tactically, long-term and short-term, and he knows that there is a difference between what the client says they want and what the client actually needs. There's a difference, it turns out. Some people that I work with don't actually get to that level. He was less attuned, maybe, to the non-technical problems than I needed him to be in the moment. Issues like managing construction traffic through a residential development were consistently afterthoughts to the fact that the equipment in the plant was falling apart. I had to remind him many times about this construction traffic. Last thing that you need to know is that he is a workaholic without compare. He was scheduled to take 2 weeks off for the December holidays, which fell dead in the middle of the timeline for this proposal. And I knew that he would try to work through those 2 weeks. I knew he would. And I tried to promise to him, we're going to make sure that you can go home to your family and enjoy your holiday. And as it turned out, that didn't happen. So the story develops. So here's where I come back to the original theme that I sort of developed earlier, plan to succeed. I knew that I would be developing this persuasive and, yes, technical document with this engineer over the course of about a month. So here are some of the things that I did, and I have a visual for you on this great flip chart. Okay, step 1, I read the RFP. So this document comes from the municipality, it's couched in legalese, and it tells you all of the submission requirements for this document that you have to prepare. So I read it, and then I read it again with a highlighter, and then I read it again while I drew up an outline based on the RFP requirements. You have to realize that these documents, as the coordinator, as the person who is developing the document, you're the only person who reads it all the way through. You really are. You're the only person who gets into the legalese. So sometimes the RFP provides like a table of contents, and sometimes it doesn't. So the idea here was to start with the structure to the content by developing this outline first. Then I looked for non-technical ways that we could improve the proposal, and I've listed it here as plan, layout, and TOC, table of contents. This is a simplification, obviously. So I looked for non-technical ways that we could improve this proposal, because I knew that my engineer would try to pack in text with lots of jargon and lots of fun technical details, but I knew that we would need white space, because white space enhances readability. So I started developing graphics. I started thinking about how to include an executive summary to outline how we would address the client's pain. Next step, I would prepare a production schedule and a list of deliverables. I say deliverables, developmental editing, the way I do it looks a lot like project management. So I use that language with my project managers at this engineering firm, with the addition of creating a persuasive document. I'm always creating persuasive documents. The main thing to keep in mind is the turnaround time, the zero tolerance deadlines, and the fact that my subject matter experts start with next to nothing created. They have not got anything written when the RFP hits. They do not come to you with a manuscript. They come to you with nothing, which is where I come in. So I got myself organized, which is number 4, organize self. I use a few different systems, but the main one that I use is a system called Kanban, and I can show you an example on my phone later. Essentially, it's a visual way of tracking the progress of different elements of your project, whatever it may be, in columns. So when the status changes, you move it to the next column and so on. It originated in the manufacturing business. So I use these Post-its, I put them on a whiteboard, and I move them down as the project progresses. So these elements give everything some structure, but I also try to balance them with my subject matter experts' other priorities, because they're never just working on a proposal. Of course, they're always working on 5 projects with lots of different people involved, and this is usually the afterthought, unfortunately. So I'm still developing an adequate system for how to organize this all, but it's a definite work in progress. So it's improving all the time, I like to think. So all that is now in place. We start writing. And I say we intentionally. I do a lot of writing, which is where my work differs vastly from what I used to do in academic publishing. Timelines and engineers' occasional phobia of writing being what they are, I frequently ghostwrite. I conduct heavy edits. Working from the perspective of a non-expert in engineering, I can be the advocate for the audience. I have questions about things that my subject matter experts might miss, but there's little time for back and forth. So I have to jump in and do that writing. The trust relationship at my firm is not developed through queries and transmittal letters. That had been my experience working at Oxford University Press. For a number of reasons, you needed to write pages of justification sometimes to make the smallest changes. Instead, working with engineers, I'm better able to just establish trust just by making the change and then explaining it face to face with them. I just call them up on the phone and say, here's what I did, I hope you like it. And that seems to actually work. That works with the particular people that I'm working with. So we do these things that I call scrums. It's based on agile project management, where they're short, regular, frequent meetings for progress updates and problem solving, like 5 minutes every morning over the course of the proposal. I visit a lot of offices, I make a lot of phone calls, and I hover a lot. I imagine myself to be a little annoying at times, but I have to be, so I feel justified. So we started writing. My engineer and I were working at a breakneck pace. I did marketing typewriting while he prepared a technical section. He sent me the technical section. I work on that while he works on the next. It's the holidays, it's our company's fiscal year end. While he's stuck in meetings, I'm developing graphics and formatting the document. He starts working at 5 a.m. I'm a night owl, so I'm working past 7 p.m. But we're all driving towards one primary goal, to win the job. There's $2 million in it for us if we do. Plus, for my engineer, there's the long-awaited chance to add a Lake Ontario water treatment plant to his list of projects. Big, big prestige for this person. But in order to win, we had a lot of smaller goals that we needed to meet first. Oh, yes, I forgot. One, submit on time. Yes, I see some reactions in the audience, yes. 1, submit on time. In proposals, deadlines are zero tolerance. If they say 2 p.m. on a Tuesday, they mean 1:59. You have to be there. 2:01 is too late. They will not open the package even. So it's the first and last hurdle. First in that, can you make it on time? Last, will your driver make it through traffic in order to get this box to the client? 2, comply with the RFP. Government procurement rules being what they are, submission requirements can be excruciating sometimes, and we must meet them. 3rd, ensure completeness. A proposal can be technically 100% compliant with all those rules in the RFP, but it can be missing a section. It could be missing a page of text or missing an appendix. This could seriously damage your argument and your credibility in the eyes of the client. 4, be strategically responsive. This is a bit of proposalese for you, not from the editorial world, but from the proposal lingo world. It should be strategically effective in a way that responds directly to the client's needs, as not stated in the RFP. So you're reading between the lines here, and you're relying on your relationship with the client. You need to show that you understand. Not only is the client's plant not big enough to sustain this ballooning population growth, but it's also falling apart. And a capacity upgrade alone will mean nothing. It will mean nothing if the layout doesn't meet fire safety requirements. So we call this responsiveness, that general concept. So next down the list, readability, enhanced readability. Proposals are skimmed. They're not read, so white space is crucial. A lot of my work, a surprising amount of my work actually, relates to headings, layout, reordering graphics, formatting, and concision. Readability has just this profound effect, psychological effect almost, on the disposition of the reader towards the persuasive documents. Even if they're marking you quantitatively, they're going to do that based on a feeling that they have about what they're reading on the page. And finally, build-in quality through detail work. It's unfortunately at the very bottom of the list. Grammar, spelling, small proofreading changes. All of these indisputably increase the quality of the proposal, and I do try to copy edit, but if I don't have time, it's more important that the proposal go out on time. Otherwise, nobody's even going to look at it. So, we were down to the wire. I was still fretting over my executive summary, but because of the deadline, I had to axe it without a second thought. It wasn't an RFP requirement. It was optional. So, in the end, we won. We got that coveted Lake Ontario plant, that $2 million job. But I mean, the story doesn't really end there, right? There's always lessons that you learn from every experience. And I mean, oh, thank you. One, in proposals, in developing proposals, you have to be willing to let things go if the requirements do not have it. They don't even exist, almost. If I had persisted on that executive summary, we could have been in serious jeopardy of being late. The engineer who drove the proposal to the client was, I think, an hour and a half early, which is too close. It's adrenaline pumping, it's too close. Second, I learned that trust in my world is established not through email and not through queries, but through face-to-face and phone conversations. And I'm terrified of the phone, so this is difficult for me to learn. But I can't tell you how many times, working with my engineers, that my carefully crafted queries have been completely overlooked. Completely overlooked. It's just a different working style. It's a different approach. So nowadays, as I said, I'm more likely to make the change, mark that I've changed it, and then talk about it in person if it even comes to that. And this is still something I'm having to get used to. Last of all, plan effectively. I learned that planning should be the bulk of the early work. There is something to be said for writing a first draft in a burst just to get writing, but giving guidance to a technical author helps them not to miss the point and avoids the stream of consciousness, which is where I come in. It's where I bring value as a developmental editor or an analog to a developmental editor. My role is to shepherd my subject matter experts through the stages of that writing process, and then we solidify the product in the remaining time. And the benefit is that nobody has to work alone. And we produce content that reflects our company brand-wise while winning us projects that improve quality of life. And that's something I find really special about the work that I do. And that, I believe, makes it worth it to plan to succeed. Thank you.
Now we're going to move from engineering to education. I've done a lot of my own work in educational publishing, and that's where I'm going to take the project that I'm going to talk to you about today. In educational publishing, materials are created for and distributed to schools and teachers directly. The things that I work on in educational publishing, they don't show up in a bookstore, and they're not available to the general public. They go straight to schools and teachers. There are just a couple of things to sort of know about educational publishing if you don't already, if you don't work in that field. There is rarely an author. There are usually many authors or many contributors. And sometimes the editor does a lot of writing as well. The editor might do a lot of rewriting, a lot of revising, a lot of condensing, a lot of making things fit into templates, as well as editing, or what we often think of as editing. A second thing about educational publishing is that curriculum drives everything. So curriculum is the things, the skills, knowledge that students are supposed to learn in each grade or by the end of each grade. In Canada, curriculum is set by the province. Curriculum is set by the provinces. So if I, as a publisher or any kind of supplier of anything to a school, if I want you to use my math textbook or my language arts program or my magazine about a social issue, I need to demonstrate to the school and the teachers and the principals, whoever's making the decision, that I need to show them how what it is I'm giving them aligns with their curriculum, how it's going to help their students and their teachers to meet the overall outcomes or the specific expectations of the curriculum. So the project I'm going to tell you about is possibly my favorite project ever. I love the cross-curricular nature of this, the combination of arts and sciences. I love the variety of this project. There was such a variety of tasks to be done. There was a lot of analysis, a lot of decisions, a lot of choices to be made, which was really interesting, also a little overwhelming. I started as an editorial assistant 18 years ago, and I got this project in 2012, 2013, and I think if it had come to me any earlier, I would have been a little bit lost. There was an author on this job, and I was the editor, but in the end, we both did both jobs. We both did both. And what we ended up producing was much more than either one of us could have done on our own. And it was definitely one of the best professional collaborations I've ever been a part of. So what was this magical project? And what did I do? Okay, so, ta-da! Destination Imagination, or DI for short. Has anyone heard of it? No. I'm going to convert you all. So Destination Imagination, or DI for short, seeks to help students of all ages, from kindergarten through university level, to develop 21st century skills, or what are called the 4 C's, and that's the letter C: collaboration, creativity, critical thinking, and communication skills. And it does this by inviting teams of students to solve open-ended, project-based challenges, and then to present their solutions. Yes, okay, right? To present their solutions, if they choose, at tournaments. Now, challenges are like the heart of DI. They're everything. Yes?
Future problem solving?
Sorry?
The future problem solving program that was, you ever heard of it?
No.
Exactly that, in the 80s.
Okay, well.
Yeah.
But so the heart of this program is instant challenges and then main or team challenges. They don't call them that. That's what we ended up sort of calling them here. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the challenges because you need to understand that to follow the rest of this. So instant challenges, as the name applies, are meant to be solved very quickly, and they make you have to think on your feet. They require you to complete a task, do a performance, or both in an extremely short time period, maybe 4, 5, 6 minutes. So I'll give you a few examples. So as a performance task, for example, you might, using only a bedsheet as a prop, have to prepare a story that is a mystery. And this mystery has to have some very specific parts to it. For example, you have to have at least one unusual character, and you have to have at least one clue in your story. Using only a bedsheet, that's it, go. Create and present a performance about what happens inside and outside an aquarium. You know, the fish on the one side, people on the other, for example. So those are sample performance instant challenges. Tasks include things like build the tallest tower using only dishes, cutlery, and cups, paper and plastic. So you get this collection and then go, build the tallest tower. Another one, design and build a bridge that spans a gap, and that would be ready for you when you walk into the room with your team. And then you get a certain amount of time to test how much weight your bridge will carry. And the materials you are given to build this bridge are things like 1 soup can, 1 pipe cleaner, 1 sheet of newsprint, and then a bunch of other, just a collection of very different materials. And finally, a combination instant challenge would be something like, here's another, again, collection of materials, make 3 hats, and then create and present a performance using all your 3 hats. And again, you've got to remember, there's time limits on this, 4, 5, 6 minutes. Another one, and I chose this one as an example, there are dozens of these, but this one that I remember was based only on a title, so the team would get 3 titles, book titles, based only on the title, create a book cover, and then persuade the owners of a bookstore to buy your book. And again, you've got 2 or 3 minutes. And some of these are a lot more complicated. There might be a certain setup in the room. There might be, certain areas on the floor, and you have to build a ping pong launcher to launch ping pong balls from this circle to the square. There's some really interesting instant challenges that involve nonverbal communication. So the team has to do everything without speaking. They're given other methods to communicate. So those are the instant challenges. The team challenges, or main challenges, they're much different. Instead of 5 minutes, you would spend several weeks or possibly even months developing your solution to a team challenge. There's always a performance element to the team challenge, but there are also multiple other elements, again, from different subject areas. So I'm only going to give 2 examples of this. One of them is called mixing apples and oranges. And what you do in this challenge is, using imagination and research, you create and perform a story about a baby animal from one species that would be adopted by an animal from another species. So, baby raccoon being raised by a turkey, puppy being raised by a cat, a baby elephant being raised by a mouse. I mean, I just made those examples up. The challenge is open-ended. All it says is, baby animal from one species being raised by another. In your performance, you have to show 3 parenting challenges that the parent is going to face with the baby. You have to create appropriate costumes for your animals. You have to depict the habitat. And in the habitat, there has to be some kind of technical element that uses a scientific principle. Light, sound, chemistry, whatever. You have to have a technical element. You have to create a baby book that shows your baby meeting certain milestones as it grows and changes and develops. And finally, at some part of this performance, you have to show your baby being reunited with its original family. Now think about the team that's working on this. Think about the kinds of things you're going to have to learn and really understand about animal growth and development to imagine this story, right? To imagine how to do this. Second example, just to give you just a flavor of the complexity and the open-ended nature of these things. Choose a real work of art whose creator is unknown. Research the time and place in which the piece was thought to have been created, and then create a performance where you tell the story of the unknown artist and how the piece was created. And when they say piece of art, they really do mean piece of art. It could be a jewelry, it could be a song, it could be a folk dance, it could be a painting, it could be a sculpture. Art. Your story must have a beginning and a middle and an end. You must incorporate an actual recreation of the piece of art as part of your performance. So if it's a painting, somehow, some way, you are going to create the painting over the course of your performance. You have to be true to the time period, and because there's always technical scientific element, your performance has to feature some technical element created using only the technologies available to that culture in that time period. So if this is, I don't know, the Roman period, or if it's 5th century France, or whatever it is, there's not going to be cars, or electricity, or running water, or anything that would not have existed at that time. So that's 2 examples of main challenge. And there are others that have a lot more of an engineering or a scientific focus, where you have to design and construct some weight-bearing structure with all kinds of parameters, but you also have to somehow test the weight of your structure as part of a story. There's one of them where it's called the challenge called Verses Foiled Again, and you actually have to, some part of your story involves a verse. You have to like compose a verse to be part of this. I know. It's crazy stuff. Divergent thinking, convergent thinking. You have to generate all kinds of ideas and then really focus it down and to present these solutions. How does DI operate? DI operates every September. The foundation that runs the program, which is about 15, 16 years old now, it releases the main challenges for the year. Teams would get together of students. They have with a team manager. They choose the challenge they want to compete with. They would register, get all their documents, start working, and then in the spring, March, April, May, they would participate in tournaments. So at the regional level, national, global, depending on how you place, you move up. You move up. Now, DI is already used all across the states, and it's in 30 countries, including Canada, as a competitive, cross-curricular, extracurricular program to supplement what teachers are doing in a classroom. Teams have an adult team manager, and the team manager might be a teacher, but it might also be a parent, or it might be someone in the community. It could be a scout leader, a principal. Like, teams can form and sign up not connected to a school. It doesn't have to be coming from a school, although many schools are involved. So that's DI overall. DI came to the attention of a Canadian publisher who thought, how could we make this work in a classroom? How could we create a classroom edition of Destination Imagination? That's what they set out to do, and that's where I come into the story. So what they wanted to do is they wanted to look at all of the challenges that had been published over the years, and they wanted to choose certain, make them available to teachers with the appropriate support and additions. The goal was to have 15 team challenges and 50 instant challenges available to start, and then they would add to that pool every year. And they would put everything into a database, so instead of publishing paper of any kind, they would put it in a database and you would be able to print the pieces that you wanted, the things that you wanted to work on. So my job was to help create the classroom edition. And here's what I started with. This pile. Those are a lot of that's not even all of them. I also got this little key with like hundreds and hundreds of instant challenges on it. This pile of all of the original material released over all of these years. They'd already hired a teacher, almost retired teacher, to start developing templates. The templates for these challenges that would be appropriate for a classroom teacher. So she had drafts of this. She'd sort of started to tackle it. They had also sort of taken 4 main challenges and some instant challenges, and they'd already kind of done a first attempt, right? They'd created a field test package, They'd taken the challenge, revised it for a teacher, and said, okay, here, use this year, tell us what you think, send us your feedback, fill out the survey, send us photographs, tell us how it worked. So you had all the feedback from the field test, you had the field test versions, the templates, and then all of that. So the first thing I did was spend about 20 hours reading and thinking and making notes and making more notes. And the first thing in the notes, so in the end I had 11 pages worth of headings and notes. And okay, I took every template, I looked at each section of it. I thought about overall questions. I thought about what's missing, what should get transferred to a teacher's guide. Note. And the very first thing I had on the top of the first page was this. I had this heading, and then I had a few bullet points, and then the second bullet point was other, ? And there was a lot of other, but this is what I started with. And you gotta remember, original destination imagination is, what is it? It's one team manager, one adult, working with one team, preparing a solution to one challenge of their choice, and sharing their work in a competitive environment. Classroom destination imagination has to work for one teacher in a classroom managing multiple teams, right? She or he might have 32 kids in a class. They might be doing 1, maybe 2 challenges over the course of their year, their school year, and they have to incorporate it and figure out how they're going to use that challenge at the same time as they're trying to teach math, teach history, teach social studies, take kids to the gym, take kids on field trips. It's a completely different context and a very different audience. And what we needed to do in this whole process, whatever happened over the next probably 14 months when we were doing all of this, was to always think about the audience. What does our audience need? What are the new pieces? Everything flows from that. And it's actually pretty standard communications theory, right? Everything is about audience and purpose, audience and purpose. Very much the case here. It was all about the audience. It was also just as important to understand and to respect the nature and the purpose of the original material. So as we created the classroom version and the accompanying teacher's guide, we worked really hard to preserve the intent and the essence of these challenges. If we were going to change something or simplify something or add something, we had to be sure we weren't losing what makes DI special. And so that's the key, right? Meet the needs of the new audience without distorting the beautiful thing that you started with. So I'm just going to give 3 or 4 examples of what that meant in practice. Original DI has a lot of scoring, right? There's penalties, there's time limits, there's all these technical requirements because it's a competitive environment. We didn't necessarily need to have all of that, but we didn't automatically cut them all out either. So in the case of the scoring, we sometimes left it in as an optional thing for a teacher. Why? Because it makes the challenge harder, and there might be some classes that are ready for that, and some teachers that look at that and go, oh yeah, I'm fine doing that, I'm fine with that element. Students, sometimes the competitive nature of things can be very motivating for some students, and again, it's up to the teacher if you know your class, if you think they're going to enjoy this attempting to get more points. And also, whenever there's a scoring element, and there was one challenge in particular I'm thinking of, there's a whole other level of strategy. Depending on how the points are assigned, you might think, well, am I going to design my planes, because there is one that involves aircraft, Am I going to design them to go farther in order to collect more points because there's more points for the farther, or am I going to make them go shorter distances but do more flights, right? There's a whole level of strategy involved with the points. So every time, overall principle for these challenges, if I keep the big picture in mind, what is it that I'm going to lose if I'm going to cut this out from the big picture? Then make a decision. Language and tone. There's a lot of the original DI is pretty, it's written not for students or for teachers, it's kind of written for, kind of in the middle, right? It's written for adults more than it is for kids. And again, it's very, a little dictatorial. You must do this, you must not do that. Again, because that's the nature of what it is. We wanted to retain the restrictions, yes. If the challenge says you're not allowed to cut the shoelaces, there's a reason that we're not going to let you cut the shoelaces, because then you get multiple pieces and we only want you to have one shoelace, for example. You know, you're allowed to use the tape, but you may not use it to attach certain things together because it makes it too easy. We need to keep the restrictions, but we can change the tone about how we present it. And even for teachers, you know, you may, we recommend, you should do this. We change the language a little bit. Understanding the audience and the purpose means that sometimes you don't touch something at all. There is a whole category of main challenges that are improvisational. They're all improv. And they are, and the author and I, Lynn, her name is Lynn, and we sort of ignored those in the first batch. And we came to the second batch, we're like, okay, let's really talk about these improv challenges. Can we do them? And we like, you know what? We can't do it in improv. You just can't do it. We couldn't find a way to do it. Also with the time and the expertise, like neither of us knew enough about improv and improv techniques to figure out how we're going to tell a teacher to try to do this. So we turned around to the publisher and said, just don't touch it. They agreed. They had pretty much come to the same conclusion. So sometimes you leave it alone because you can't adapt it. And a last sort of point is when it came to the curriculum. Oh, the curriculum. If you work in educational publishing, you know why I'm sighing. Curriculum has these overall expectations, and then it has very specific sort of things that you have to learn. So on the overall side, students will learn in science, for example. Students will learn to construct knowledge of life science, physical science, earth and space science. Okay, pretty general. In grade 4, one of those topics is habitats. And then if you get really down, once you drill down, okay, in grade 4 we're doing habitats, and then you have this whole long list of things like examine and investigate local habitats and their associated populations of plants and animals. And you have this whole list of very specific things related to this topic. So if we were going to tell a teacher how to use, you know, how some of these challenges fit with their curriculum, what do we do? I can't guarantee that a team that's going to do mixing apples and oranges, that one with the animals, that they are going to examine and investigate a local habitat. Maybe they choose an animal that doesn't live locally. I can't guarantee that you're going to do that. And I don't want to narrow the scope of the challenge for the sake of meeting an expectation. Also, that expectation is in grade 4. What if I want the challenge to be available to a range of students, which we did. We want kids in grade 3 or 6 to be able to do that. So we wanted the challenges to work at more than one grade level. And to drill, anyway, we gave up trying to correlate to specific expectations. The question came up to discuss it, but it was it just wasn't possible, and it didn't serve the material, and it didn't serve the teachers. We correlated to the general outcomes. And then we just had a lot of notes in these challenges about the focus and the intent of the challenge and the possibilities, right? So that teachers can look at it and go, oh, you know what? My class is doing this, and there's the connection, and this is how it's going to work for us. So, you know, one of the things we suggested to teachers for mixing apples and oranges was, you know, if you have, you know, animals and plants appear in different grade levels and in different ways, you know, think about what your class has done this year and how it could work for you. You might want to tell your students that one of the species they choose has to be one that you studied this year, for example. So the entire project boils down to this: adapt without losing the essence, make it work for your audience. That was really the bottom line of this project. And I'm just going to end by talking a little bit about how I worked with the author, Lynn. Since this presentation is about working with people with experts who have knowledge and information and ideas to share in some way, because she was the teacher and had 35 years of teaching experience at different levels and writing curriculum and everything you could imagine, she was the expert on the audience. She knew teaching and she knew teachers. Because I had read all of that, because I was really enthusiastic, because I'd gone up and looked up videos of DI solutions online and could send her examples, because I spent a lot of time on this and I had a certain background that made me really appreciate it and understand it. I kind of became an expert on the material. So she advocated for the teachers and I advocated for the programs. And between the two of us, we wrote and edited things together. So once we had the template set, I would write certain bits that we had said, okay, since I understand the challenge, I'll write these, and then we'd go to her, and she would fill in the specific notes to teachers. And then we'd go back and forth until we were happy. And just like Dani, I look back at my emails from this project and I thought, there's nothing here. Like, how do we do all this work? It's just files going back and forth. And then, of course, I remember that we spent a lot of time on the phone. 2-3 times a week, it might be a 10-minute call, it might be a 45-minute call. I remember all the pacing I did in my apartment as I was talking to her, because we just discussed things. I'd say, watch the video, call me, and then we'd talk it through. And that's how we did it, and this was a fantastic project. If you have never heard of Destination Imagination, go home and Google it.
Any fancy flip charts, just blank pages. So I'm often asked, Andrea, what is it that you do? And the best way to describe my role at CPA Canada is to paint the following picture. And I apologize in advance, a lot of my examples are food-based. So picture yourself, or imagine yourself at the grocery store, and you have your shopping list in one hand and you're pushing your cart in the other, and you're navigating through the aisles, and you smell something delicious, and you see a food demonstrator there whipping up a batch of meatballs. You know that meatballs is not on your shopping list, but you're drawn to it, and you sample a meatball, and you're like, wow, these are delicious, and the next thing you know, you're putting those boxes of meatballs in your shopping cart. That's a little bit of what I do. So that food demonstrator has hooked you in, and as you're loading in those boxes of meatballs, she's also offering other food pairings and products that will go with those meatballs. So perhaps the cocktail napkins, the toothpicks, maybe suggest a bottle of wine. So my role at CPA Canada, as mentioned, is like a food demonstrator. It's to showcase the great publications that we produce for our audience, who are professional accountants, and to create interesting and compelling content and to link to other products and resources. So we want to show our audience that our website is a one-stop shop. We have great products, and here are some other ones that you'll be interested in as well. So just to give you a little bit of background on the department that I work in, I work with 13 professional accountants, also known as principals, and they are the subject matter experts in different practice areas. So their job is to produce guidance materials for accountants, and my job is to get our audience to read them. So some may argue that's the role of marketing and communications, and which it is, and they have their own strategies, but my job is to create the user experience. I credit my background in journalism and experience as an editor and a passion for content in order to do what I do effectively. And here's how. I brought a little sample. So this is just one of the products that one of our principals has developed with the subject matter expert. And this one is a female talent management toolkit for organizations and a career navigation toolkit for women. So this particular principal, her area of practice is women in leadership and advancing women, female accountants into leadership roles. So if something like this appears on your desk or even a PDF in your email and you're looking through, you're scanning through like, wow, they're each over 100 pages in length. Do I have the time to read this? Just look at your own reading patterns and how you consume content. I don't know many people who have that time these days. So what I do is I work with the subject matter experts on how to drive people to that publication. I read an article recently, and it says that adults have a shorter attention span than a goldfish. The average attention span for goldfish is 9 seconds, but people are now generally losing concentration after 8 seconds. So that means you have to grab your audience quickly and effectively. So as an editor, I put my content strategy hat on, and I create content based on that particular toolkit. I want to grab the audience with a small piece of writing that includes the key points from those toolkits and present the content found in a fun and engaging way. And one way that I do that is just simply through article writing. So in March, March is International Women's Day. So I created an article based on that theme and looked at the products and publications that we produce for women and how to advance them into leadership roles, and just basically use that as a hook to, again, showcase the topic, the products, and to encourage our members to download. One of the challenges that we have within our organization, we have a great website with great resources. Some were developed, 3-5 years ago, but the content is still relevant. So we're constantly looking for ways to refresh it and still drive people back to those pages, to those documents, because they are still relevant. Since I work with so many principals in my department, and I know what each one of them is working on, I have a holistic view of the entire department. And with that, I'm able to look for linkages between different publications and connect themes and topics, so it makes packaging publications much easier. And I also work with a subject matter expert to develop those. So if, for example, like those toolkits, I'm not a subject matter expert in the area, but I'll identify some other publications that I think that our audience members will find useful. And again, work with the principals to make sure that I haven't missed anything or I'm reading the content correctly. Creating meaningful content with products that we just have sitting on our website is really what wakes me up, or gets me up in the morning rather. It's an opportunity to provide our audience with information, link to additional information, and simplify highly complex issues or even technical information for different audiences. So we have a lot of products in our vault that are just as long as that, and it's just filled with a lot of technical information. I mean, to the the average accountant, that would be fine. But sometimes accountants will share those materials with their finance team who are not necessarily accredited accountants. So we want to make sure that our resources are available to a wide variety of audiences. So what I do now is very different from when my role was predominantly editing. I found that as an editor, I had very little freedom editing content that was produced by our subject matter experts. We often battled over where commas would go, and sometimes, at least in the accounting world, sometimes by moving a comma would significantly alter the meaning of a sentence, and we're dealing with accounting standards. That's not a good thing. I almost felt like I was giving up my duty as a responsible editor. I was suggesting changes and they weren't accepting them. And as someone who is very detail-oriented as myself and glued to her style books, it was really hard to turn a blind eye. And I know that Dani and Dimitra both alluded to that in their presentations as well. So the compromise was I let the subject matter experts worry about the technical information, and they can make sure that it's accurate. I occasionally scan for any grammatical issues, and then I just basically take their work to create shorter, digestible, snappy pieces that the audience will be attracted to and draw it back to their main publications. Now, just because you're writing about content that's not yours, it doesn't mean you can't make it unique. Adding knowledge or entertaining people is an art. The right content strategy and combining ideas from different publications can be the answer. And that's what, again, I just love about my job. I enjoy the part of telling stories and finding the story within the story. And that's what this allows me to do, like when I'm working with other people's publications. When I was putting this presentation together, and I mentioned to Dimitra this morning, I thought, our peers are going to look at me and say, like, big deal, you're creating articles out of existing publications. Like, who isn't doing that? But, having a discussion with my boss, and I said the same thing, and she said, well, we're not editors, we're not writers, we're accountants. We're wearing a different hat. We're looking to you for, the value and the expertise and the skill sets that you bring. She's like, so you're looking through our material through a different lens, so try not to lose sight of that. So I thought that was something something very valuable, and I tend to remind myself about that every time I'm tackling a new project. You know, even they assigned me an article, which I turned around in about an hour, and again, I thought, oh, like, big deal. This is, you know, this is easy. I drew the key points, like, what's so hard about this? And again, just that reminder, well, that's why we're accountants, and you're the editor, you're the writer. So I have some best practices that I found for creating meaningful content. If you're working for an organization, it's really important to make sure that anything that you produce reflects the organization's goals. I found it's important to be useful by being purposeful with the links that you include. So when I'm creating complimentary articles on our publications and I'm including links to other publications, I'm not just including, you know, links to other publications for the sake of doing it. You know, make sure that you want to create that great user experience and value add to draw people to those. Like, they want to get something out of those publications as well. Also, you want to provide exclusive information that your audience won't find anywhere else. So if we're trying to be the one-stop shop for accountants, we want to make sure that no other accounting organization, association around the world is producing what we're doing. It's also important when new information becomes available to update it. So a lot of what we do is on our website, so we have that ability to constantly evolve whatever we have on there as the information is updated. So it makes it a very quick process. And just to be accessible, so when you're linking to other materials, make sure that your URLs are working properly. You don't have any dead links, because that just causes frustration for the user. And that is all. Thank you.
So what we just wanted to do now is we have lots of time for questions, and thank you for not interrupting us during, we forgot to say that. We didn't want to be interrupted to make sure we got through all of the material. So we're happy to take questions, but we'd also we've given you some very different stories and some very different experiences, but we wanted you all to think about whether there's anything that we talk about that reminds you of what you do, where you see a link or a connection, or oh, I never thought about that, or I never saw it that way. So maybe we're going to give everybody 2 minutes to talk to your neighbor about what you heard or questions that you might have, and then we'll open the floor.
Talk amongst yourselves.
Talk amongst
My child wasn't coming home, and I kept trying to tell him, I don't think about college, I know you're drawing, why do you call it? I'm an actor, I heard, but it was, because then they finally gone, something with,
some people have slowed down and some people are still talking. So who would like to share anything? Question, comment, observation?
I'd like to ask Dani, when you've been at that job for a few months, did you have other RFPs as models where you could sort of look to them and say, this is the structure, this is what's been done so far, this is what has succeeded before? Or did you make it all up from the beginning?
No, there's an established there's a proposal group, so I'm not the only person working on this, and we do have a business development manager who is actually an EAC member. She's not here tonight. She's actually a member of the branch. You might have met her at the door at previous meetings. Her name's Tara. So she sort of develops the strategy and then sort of guides the archiving. So we do have a significant archive of stuff, but the issue is that each project is unique. So each project's needs are unique. The clients don't differ in their needs from project to project, in that the region of Waterloo will always sort of have similar priorities depending on who the project manager is. So you can sort of,
and similar requirements to meet their standard?
Yeah, generally you're not going to get an RFP from the City of Toronto that is radically different from other City of Toronto RFPs, because something is probably wrong. Something is probably wrong if their RFP structure is different.
Mm-hmm.
It's suddenly they're not requiring you to include experience in this area. Like,
How much back and forth can there be?
How do you mean?
I mean, if you think something's wrong with the RFP, can you get in touch with the issuing agency and say,
Right.
what's doing with this?
So usually what they'll do is they will set a specific procurement individual. You can't talk to anybody else at the client except for that one person regarding this RFP. And then usually the deadline for questions is, say, 4 business days from the deadline. So they sort of try to level the playing field a little bit by making sure that everybody gets their questions in. Because after the questions get asked, they have to issue an addendum to the RFP answering the questions so that everybody can have the same information. So there is a history of successful RFPs that I can refer to, but I try not to do too much what's called boilerplate. We try not to use too much boilerplate because it reads like plastic. You can tell, and you don't want to be that procurement person who's having to, because you skip it. You skip that material, and you want to make your proposal unskippable. You want to make it gripping. And unfortunately, boilerplate it reads that way. It reads like it's not talking to the person on the other side. So that's really where my role is. I make sure that the RFP is talking to the person on the other side. So, yeah.
Dan, you talked a lot about having to develop a persuasive document, which usually implies understanding the audience. And these things are designed such that you will not be in touch with people who are really deciding.
Yeah.
So how do you handle that? Persuading someone you know nothing about?
Well, there are certain writing strategies that you can use. For example, there are a few structural sort of organizational tactics that you can use to present information in such a way that it is more readable. It's a little bit more like a narrative. For example, there's one called APB, which is Approach, Process, Benefits. So you start with your general approach and then you develop the rest of the paragraph towards, and the benefit of this solution is so-and-so. It will save you money, or it will allow you to get faster results.
So apart from the elements of rhetoric.
Yes, so apart from that, we also have a business development manager, so I talked about that. Business development is sort of the overarching stand-in for sales. It's like we don't really have sales in what we're talking about. We have business development, which is developing client relations, getting a good relationship going with them. Usually, if we don't have at least a 12-month relationship in place with the client organization, we do not pursue a proposal. We don't just pursue an RFP out of nowhere. We have to ensure that there's an existing relationship in place between the company and the client organization. So there is quite a substantial preliminary process leading up to the actual RFP. We never go in without some sort of relationship. And the way that we develop that relationship is by having projects with them already, so that the engineers have some sense of what their priorities are. For example, we know, having worked with certain clients, that their priority is cost. So they want the lowest cost proposal. So every time we're going to try to strategize in order to get a cheap, like a low price. Or we know that their priority is technical excellence. For example, the region of, I don't remember which region it is, region of Peel, I think, is about technical excellence. So your solution has to demonstrate that your proposal has to show that you're the expert. So we know these things because of that lengthy preliminary process that leads up to the RFP. We never go into that.
So I'm sure you have a pre-existing understanding of the audience before you start these things.
Oh, well, I don't personally, but I get that information from the people that I work with, yes. It is quite lengthy. There's a lot involved, but.
Okay, Stella and then Nicole.
Dani, that's about the RFP. So if your RFP is successful, does your presentation then become the blueprint for the project? And are you responsible for making sure that as the project progresses, it meets all the key points that you've outlined in the RFP?
I'm not responsible in any way. Because I'm not,
You're an engineer.
well, yeah, I'm not an engineer. I don't have certification through PEO, which is Professional Engineers Ontario. So the people who are responsible are actually the people who sign off, who put their signature, who is usually that person is either a principal of the company or a project manager or something like that. So they're responsible for following through on the promises that we make. But you have to understand that a proposal always goes through at least 3 or 4 people. And it very rarely is not read by a vice president of the company. So there's a lot of redundancy in the process to make sure that we're not promising them the moon, or we're not going to treat all of the water like Ontario. We're going to solve all of your problems. Like, there's a lot of like really good sort of a safety net around me to make sure that, and as a marketing writer, I'm about as conservative as they come. So you have to understand when I'm writing these things, I'm avoiding those kinds of grandiose claims that could get us in trouble. But yeah, it's I'm not responsible because my signature doesn't go on it. So I have that advantage.
Nicole.
My comment is for the third speaker. I blank on her name.
Andrew.
Okay. Yeah, this is more of a comment than a question, but I do a lot of academic editing, but also I have a few like outlier clients that I do very different things with, and one of those clients is I'm kind of a part-time assistant to a career coach, and she does a lot of different type of content. She writes on several different blogs. She's got several social media accounts, and then she takes a lot of her either blogging material or speaking material. She's always trying to turn them into something new, like whether it's an ebook or like a webinar. She hosts like conferences and things like that. So a big part of my job is working with her. Like I'll take blog posts and then write a bunch of tweets about the same post, or take one blog post and like switch it up a little bit to put on a different blog. Because she's like paid to write on different people's blogs or organizations' blogs. And coming from an academic background, at first that felt very wrong to me, because in academia you're always, for example, if you put one manuscript forward to publish with one press, like it kind of stays there. Like you can't take that idea and then like turn it into all these different things. Right. So I kept trying to not get her, but like the suggestions I was making when I think back on it, I was trying to get her to reinvent the wheel and come up with something totally from scratch. But the longer I've worked with her and like worked with this kind of content, I guess I'm realizing that even small changes, you attract totally different people. And it's just even a slightly different lead into the topic. It might be the same topic that she's put out there, 6 or 7 different times, but just a slightly different intro or a slightly different angle will get different segments of people. And then the other thing is like, I call like the social media amnesia effect, where you can put something out on social media or on a blog or whatever, people read it, and like 6 months later, they come back to it. Like it's maybe, I don't know if it's always the same people, but just a totally different group of people. It's almost like you can put almost the exact same thing out there, and it's not plagiarism, it's not cheating.
exactly. And a big part of, I mean, I'm very active on social media, you know, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and I just, a key part of what's helped me in my role is just looking at my own ways of how I consume information. And, you know, further to your point, like, I mean, even just receiving different emails or newsletters, like I'll glance at something and then I'll forget about it, you know, and then I'll go back and, oh, I did read a bit of that, or I have read that before, or something will just look completely new to me. And, you know, and that's one thing too. I sit on the company's social media committee, and we are representatives from different departments within the organization. So we're constantly coming up with social media messaging, looking for, you know, I work in a department called Research Guidance and Support. So look at the products that we're developing, and maybe someone in education is developing a course on that topic. So looking at how we can create those synergies. And, you know, we use Hootsuite to pre-schedule our tweets. And I'm looking at, you know, somewhat the scheduling that my colleagues are doing, and they're like, oh, they're just scheduling it for, you know, like Monday through Friday this week, and that's it. And it's like, you're doing your product like such a disservice by only putting it out there like 5 times in 1 week, because you have to look at the times you're scheduling it. Our audience, our members are not all on Twitter, for example. So you have to really, you know, play around with it and see what works for your content. And, you know, you made a good point too about even like changing the introductions, changing the titles even. You know, that's something that's worked very well for us as well. And, you know, you just have that opportunity to be very creative with the content. So it's a great thing, that opportunity to do so.
I'm sorry, I can't read your name, Ken?
Julianne.
Julianne.
I have a question about destination imagination. It sounds like the original kind of concept maybe not would have been geared towards this, but would have resulted in being done by like gifted classes, by parents who had children, put money and time to spend on an extracurricular program. And basically just participated in by the very fortunate, both like in their intellectual background and their financial situation, but that's not the situation that all classroom teachers are in. And I'm wondering how much of your work has to do with adapting the program, not just for the teacher audience, but for the student audience and teachers who are teaching special needs classes or behavioral classes and that kind of issue.
Excellent question. Destination Imagination, the original, is actually not. It really is for everyone. And there's a couple of ways that they ensure that. First of all, in order to participate, there's very strict spending limits. And when you go to a team, you're right, because otherwise we could spend as much money on the costumes and the whatever. We could buy all kinds of fancy stuff. No, you have some limit of something like $125 or whatever. And the registration fees are very low to participate in these things. So they're definitely trying to level the playing field that way. And then the other a really wonderful thing about Destination Imagination and how it is set up is it really is for everyone, because everyone, no matter your age, no matter your background, everyone has talent or skill. Maybe you know how to sew, maybe you play the piano, maybe you're just a really funny person. And Destination Imagination says within these challenges and within your team, and a lot of those notes in the roadmap for a team leader are, you know, getting your team members to get to know each other. What are their skills? What are their interests? What do they like? And to use those in your solution. It really is for everyone. So when it came time to do the classroom edition, it's not really that we worried about, I mean, in original DI, kids are there because they want to be, and if you're in a classroom, you know, you're working with everybody, so yeah, that's a factor, and that's really up to the teacher and classroom management strategies that she or he would already know. But certainly as far as the teaching notes went, we didn't do anything really different than what any other good educational program does, which is give teachers tools. Like if you need ways to choose groups, here are ways to put groups together. Here are suggestions for you know, giving students time to do certain things. Here are self-reflection, self-assessment tools. We didn't really do anything special, but we didn't do anything special because already in educational publishing and educational materials, the people who write and develop these things are always conscious of providing tools for different groups and suggestions for different groups. And really, a good teacher has that kind of training too. Does that?
It does.
Stella.
Okay. For DI, you were talking about you were working with the teacher, you were the expert on the materials, you were talking, the publisher is weighing in. Did you have to run any of it by
Yes.
the originals for approval?
Not so much for approval. They certainly supplied a lot of material. They supplied a lot of material, and we had a couple of meetings at a certain point, and people came up to us to a couple of group meetings. They kind of let us do our thing. They did want to see it all at the end, and they were very happy. And it was incredibly gratifying. I mean, I wasn't there, but the publishers were talking to each other, and it was incredibly gratifying to hear the comment when they looked through and said, yeah, you guys would get VI. So we did a good job. They definitely had a look at it all, and because they were considering, they don't have their own classroom edition, they didn't at the time, but they were very interested in what we were doing to see how we might do it in case they ever decided to go that route. So we certainly had contact and support, and they did look it over, because you're right, we're calling it Destination Imagination, and that's their brand. Yes, I'm sorry, I can't see your name.
That's okay. So I just have a question about, I don't know what your backgrounds are, but if they were very different, what process do you use to become familiar with the specialized material, the core of it, so that you can analyze and manipulate this information?
A lot of research on my part, just so that I'm familiar with the topic in itself. I mean, at least know some of the key details. I'm grateful that I work with principals that some are very technical, more on the standard side, and some are more of business, general business topics, such as, women in leadership. So I was very excited when I got to play with that, because it's something that's a little more easy to take in. But I think the key to my success as well has just been, I attend a lot of the board meetings that our principals have. They all report to their own board, who is also a sounding board for information that they discuss, what are the trends happening in their respective areas. So taking part in those, and just to really put my ear to the ground and hear about what are the issues, what are the topics, what are accountants talking about. So even I block time in my schedule every week just to do enviro scans and learn about specific topics. So it's definitely a huge learning curve. And also, and that's what builds that trust with the principals in my department, going to them and with an already prepared article or social media messaging, and them just having to look at it and saying, okay, Andrea, she gets it. Not having to sit with them and then having to explain everything, and eliminating that back and forth is very helpful. So just staying on top of the information and just doing a lot of background research.
It's a lot of what I do too. I feel like I do a lot of interviewing actually. So I will sit down with a person and a dictaphone, and I will get them to explain a problem to me, for example. So just being in the environment where I can listen to someone talk about the problem sort of gets you immersed in the jargon a little bit more. I'm not a process engineer. I don't know how water gets, I don't know the details anyway of how water gets treated in order to become drinking water. I'm not that savvy, but having sort of an idea of what the priorities are it helps a lot. And I guess the other half of that is that because I work in an engineering consultancy, engineers have to do a minimum amount of professional development every year in order to maintain their accreditation. So there's always loads of professional development happening in our firm. People are, giving presentations to their peers saying, we did this cool bridge, we did this dam, we did, I don't know. We have a roller coasters group who present all the time because roller coasters are so cool. So there's always in-house professional development going on. So people are presenting about their specialties and stuff like that. And then I am expected to do professional development hours. So I spend a lot of it doing competency training in engineering specifically. So just getting the language, reading about engineering news, infrastructure funding. Oh, yay. It's very exciting for us.
All right, on that lovely note, because I am looking at the time, it's about 9:15, and we'd like to leave time for people to continue chatting or to come up and ask us more questions. We have some sample things at the back that we might want to flip through, and we'd like to thank you all very much for coming. It was really fun to put this together.